Welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish main range review. Today I'm going to take a look at the second episode from the 6th Doctor, Constance Clark and Flip trilogy for 2017, which is of course The Middle, written by Chris Chapman. This is the penultimate episode of the Big Finish main range for this year. Literally, we've got 2 months left of 2017, not even that. Life goes quick when it's literally falling apart. Per usual, in the description below, I will leave the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. It's out now. The current physical CD is $14.99 and the download is $12.99. It's exclusive to the Big Finish website for this month, and it will be on the national release as per usual on December 31st, 2017, the last day of this year before we go into 2018, obviously. And if you also check out the Big Finish website, there will also be the trailer to this episode on there as well, if you are interested by what I say in this review. So taking a look at some of the details for this release now, as I've previously been saying, it is written by Chris Chapman and it is directed by Jamie Anderson. Generally, overall, for the scripting for this story, I was really impressed, actually. I think that this episode is a major gap between the previous one that we've been reviewing, and of course the Behemoth, which was a pure historical that I was complimenting very much in the previous month. This is a completely different story, pretty much polar opposite, because you've got a pure historical, then you've pretty much got a pure sci-fi, so it's really nice to see a little bit of variation there, well, a lot of variation in there, because that is exactly what Doctor Who is about. And generally, overall, for the directing of this one as well, felt really cinematic. I think that Jamie Anderson did an incredibly good job. So yeah, generally overall for the production stuff, it was really good for this release. Taking a look at the cast, we of course have Colin Baker playing the 6th Doctor, and as per usual for this episode, in fact, I'm going to comment on the whole TARDIS team as a whole to start with. This is the episode that I in fact think that this TARDIS team is really starting to find its feet. I was really enjoying them in the previous episode, having sort of the Behemoth and the different challenges of that, of having the sort of pure historical impacting the characters in different ways. This episode once again very much does that, however to the different extent of age, which I'll be getting onto in a little bit when I come to talk about the script of this episode. Yeah, I really have actually got to like the TARDIS team for this. I liked both of the companions as it is. I love Constance Clark. I love how historical she is. I love how period she is, because she is very different to your modern day companion. She interacts with different things in different ways. And then you've got Flip, who is pretty much once again the polar opposite to that. And I think that this script very much plays with those contrasts incredibly well. And yeah, generally overall for the TARDIS team for this one, each character has something to do. They essentially do get split off into their own adventures. They all have something to contribute. They all have their own mini adventures. They all meet different people, and then at the very end they all come together to of course sort of complete the story. So I think that generally for this one, the Doctor as well, especially Colin Baker, had some wonderful moments in this one. I think that this was a rather serious story, and yeah, generally overall he was really enjoyable to listen to. I just love his Doctor. I think his voice is generally incredibly good as well, very welcoming, also very daunting in serious situations as well. So the general compliments for Colin Baker as per usual. He was absolutely excellent. Lisa Greenwood as Philippa Jackson, I think that once again she is incredibly fun. I really do love Flip. I think that she's that, once again, a really good modern day companion. She's very fun, very up to date. She uses, say, OMG. She's very 21st century, and when paired with the 6th Doctor, it really does have some fun conversations with her, very comedic, and she's very serious as well at some points. I think that she can really nicely interact with certain situations when faced with sort of certain things. She has had many learning curves over the past adventures, and once again for this episode she sort of steps into her own little area for this one. I think that once again has some really good moments. Miranda Rayson as Constance Clark, once again she gets separated off for this release to have her own little adventure with Mr. York, and I think that generally once again she's really stepped into her own for this release. I think that she's a very powerful character. She's a very powerful female. She definitely doesn't like being told what to do, and I think that once again this episode has some really nice sort of mirroring elements with her area of where she comes from. Of course, Bletchley Park being a Wren in the World War, and I think that this episode once again has the idea of war in there, but sort of a more sci-fi related war, so it relates to sort of the part in her era that she comes from. I think that really nicely balances out for this release. Yeah, generally really enjoyable. Other people for this release, it is in fact a very small cast for this one. We have Mark Heap as the middleman, Sheila Reid as Rihanna, and then we have Wayne Forston as Roman, and then Holly Sullivan as Olivia York, and then we have Chloe Wrenchback as Chloe as well. So yeah, generally overall really small, but I think that it is actually a really effective release. Moving on to the story and scripting for this episode now, I actually think that even though that we're only 2 episodes into this trilogy, I actually think that this could possibly be one of my favourite trilogies for this year, because it pretty much sums up Doctor Who. As I was saying, we have that pure historical, now we have this pure sci-fi, and the next one called Static seems to be a little bit of a gothic horror, so pretty much it goes into all of your areas of Doctor Who. It sums up Doctor Who as a whole, and I think that all of them so far seem to be rather experimental. I don't know if it was just because I was in a good mood when listening to this this release, but I think that this one has generally got a really nice idea behind it. This idea of a dystopian future that's all based around age, and basically everybody gets separated off. You have the beginning, you have the middle, which is of course what this episode is named after, and then you have the very end. And basically up until a certain age, I do believe that it is 35, you have to do whatever you want. It's sort of a little bit of the equivalent of a sort of 1 to 8 teenage range at the moment, where you have in sort of modern day life, where you have the teenagers sort of going to do education and then doing whatever they want, parties, things like that. So it's sort of a little bit of the rebel stages. They don't have to work, but this sort of area, once they get to 35, they then need to go and work, and everybody else sort of has that standard office job, and basically they need to do this office job in order for the younger generation to not be able to do anything. It's a little bit like sort of the leisure, the work, and then the very end. And the end is where everybody goes, I do believe, after their 65th birthday, when they then of course turn old, and then they need to go essentially into sort of retirement. However, this retirement is in fact sort of fighting for a war, much like how you have in the World War where you had conscription. This episode bases around the idea of, well, let's not send our young people off to war, let's send our older generations off to war, because they've already had a life and they can sort of serve everybody else, and they can sort of represent their planet in a way. And at the very end of this story, we do essentially have these grannies and pensioners fighting in this war that doesn't exactly seem to be all of it sort of seems to be. I think that generally this has some really interesting ideas. I love the idea of age and having that different section of life. It is sort of rather, it gets humanity and then puts it to a other level. It emphasises that, and it sort of makes it a little bit more simple and shows how it is a bad idea. And I think that generally you have the rebels in there as well, where you have the younger people that want to do those jobs and sort of want to have a more of a future. And yeah, it's really interesting. As I say, I don't know if it's just because I was in a good mood when listening to this one, but I think it was really experimental and in fact a really fun one. It actually drew me in really quickly. We got into about 10 minutes into this one and I was already there, already hooked. Really excited to see where this episode was going. I kind of just had a good vibe from the offset, thinking this is going to be a rather fun story with some decent ideas. At the very start of the story, we're also introduced to the idea that it is Constance Clark's birthday, and we have Flip getting all excited over that, saying that they have to go and do a Wren party, and basically have a little bit of a sort of average teenager style of party type thing, because Flip is, of course, I do believe it mentions around 19, which is something that I have wondered. I do believe that I brought it up in the previous review, what Flip's actual age is. So she's still pretty young, still got a lot to learn. And I think that that is a wonderful comparison to have somebody like Constance Clark that is a very strong female. And I think that gradually we are seeing throughout these stories that Flip is sort of learning off Constance Clark, and she's generally growing up a little bit and sort of having a little bit of, as I say, a learning curve. But at the same time, Constance Clark is sort of learning to let go a little bit as well and have a little bit more fun. I think that it's a really fun relationship with them, because at the very beginning you do kind of feel like Flip is being the annoying character, and both the Sixth Doctor and Constance Clark are sort of getting a little bit annoyed by her because she wants to go and do young things. However, Constance wants to have a little bit more of a relaxed birthday, but at the same time you can understand the frustration, you can understand what's going on between them, because they go to a spa to have a little bit of relaxation. Flip is absolutely enjoying it, Constance Clark is kind of enjoying it as well because she's learning to let go a bit, and the Sixth Doctor is absolutely hating it. So we do have a robotic massage with the Sixth Doctor at the very beginning, which I think that that is generally probably worth it for that 1 minute alone for this release. Once again, very fun, comedic, and as I said, I think that all of them just complement each other so well, and it really does introduce that interesting idea for this one and actually brings the characters into that as well. I think that having the idea of age and then showing how that actually affects the companions, of course having Flip sort of in the very early stages of being at the beginning, and then of course with Constance Clark having her birthday, she's then put into the middle, and then the Sixth Doctor being over 900 years old, he is of course put into the end of all the older people. So naturally you get the perspectives of absolutely everybody. The Sixth Doctor goes and meets some older people, Constance goes to meet somebody called Mr. York, who just so happens to have a daughter in the beginning, and then of course Flip is in the beginning with the daughter of the person that Constance Clark is with. So as I say, you get all perspectives from the different age ranges in this story. I think that is a really good way to deliver it. I think that one of my main criticisms for this one may be that it would have been nice to see a little bit more of the higher ups, because we get introduced to them at the very end and the main idea and aims around these people, and we get introduced introduced to the idea that it's all a little bit of a corporate thing, a little bit of a business ploy, and a little bit of generally a money-making scheme. And I think it would have been nice to have a little bit more of that, maybe having in the final episode that being introduced a little bit earlier on, to have the full sort of 4-part ending to be relating to that business idea, because it is literally thrown in there probably within the last 10 to 15 minutes. So I think that it would have been nice to maybe develop that a little bit further, or maybe have a little bit more of the idea of the alien invasion type thing, because I'm not going to mention much about that in this review. However, there is this idea of an alien that is in this release that isn't all that it seems. It is relating to the ending piece, as in the actual end, not the ending of the story where all the old people are. So I think it may be nice to have a little bit of an idea of why that was happening a little bit more, or just a bit of development with those creatures or something, because it's odd because I refer to them as creatures but they're technically not creatures at the same time. So as I say, maybe a few things that could have been improved on relating to that corporate idea, maybe that more money making scheme. As I say, I was sort of expecting something a little bit like Parting of the Ways in series 1, the idea of a game station, it all being for entertainment or something like that, just the idea to make money. So yeah, it would have maybe been nice to have a little bit more development in that area. However, naturally, with this being a Big Finish main range story, and actually with it being a Sixth Doctor one as well, we do have a little bit of a dark twist to an extent where the older pensioner people actually near enough start killing their relatives and family towards the very end of the story. And there is in fact a moment where there is pretty much a lot of destruction within the actual city, where people need to go and pretty much destroy the homes of their relatives and things like that. And it is very dark, it does play on emotion, and naturally I do quite like that, because that's what happens when it comes to Doctor Who and dark stories. I do quite like it, and I think that is the perfect way to in fact deliver impact. I think that Chris Chapman does a really good job for this release to do that. Once again, it may be nice to have that been a bit more experimented with, but at the same time I really respect this release for what it actually does. It is a little bit darker and plays with the idea of main questions about life as well, and the ideas of the different phases that we go through in life. And I generally actually never find myself recommending a Big Finish main range story. I always say that if you are interested to get into Big Finish stories, I normally actually recommend the episodes from within the actual box sets, as they are a shorter duration, things such as Classic Doctor's New Monsters, because they are around 1 hour long. However, I never actually find myself really recommending the Big Finish main range ones for those people that are inexperienced with Big Finish stories. However, with the middle, I actually do recommend it. I think that it is a really good story to start on, especially if you are a Sixth Doctor fan, because the plot isn't exactly too complex or anything like that. It does have a few nice elements in there, however, it doesn't really go and completely push the boat out, and I think that is a really good thing for a Big Finish new listener. And generally overall, if you're somebody that is a moderate Big Finish listener, or even a hardcore Big Finish listener, I do recommend this release as well, especially if you like the Sixth Doctor and his companions. So yeah, overall, generally for this one, I actually recommend this to a very wide audience. I think it's a very good one to start on, and I can't believe that I'm actually saying that for a Big Finish main range review, because it never normally is like that. So thanks for watching this review, and I guess I'll see you all in the next Sixth Doctor Flip and Constance Clark release. In fact, the last of the 2017 main range releases for this year, in Static, and it looks quite dark, and naturally, as per usual, say it with me everyone, I quite like dark stories. Guess I'll see you then. Thanks for watching this review, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.